So good morning and thank you all for joining us again. So this month it's just going to be myself presenting again, and I'm going to give you a recap on Windows Server licenses and an overview of virtualization from a Microsoft point of view. And before I start, just a reminder for everybody, the webinar is being recorded, so the marketing team will send out links for you after a few days. Okay, so let's start by looking at Windows Server, because from a virtualization point of view, this is where it all starts from a Microsoft point of view. So a recap, hopefully a lot of you are aware of this, and this is just a recap for you, but Windows Server is licensed by each physical host, and on each physical host, you need to count the number of processors and the number of cores and the number of VMs on each server. Now, there's a minimum requirement for licensing these servers. So for each processor within the host, you need to count a minimum of 8 cores. And then for the host itself, you need a minimum of 16 cores licensed for that host. So for example, if you have a single processor, 8-core server, then you need to license for 16 cores, which is the minimum licenses for Windows Server. However, if you've got 4 processors on your server, each with 10 cores, you then need to buy 40 core licenses for the server. Now, another slight complication with this, the licenses come in 2-core packs or 16-core packs. So once you've got the number of cores you need for all your servers, you just divide it by 2, and that will give you the number required. But in reality, if you provide your account managers with details of the host, how many processors and how many cores on there, but you also need to give them details of how many virtual machines are running on there as well. The reason you need to do that is Windows Server comes in two versions. So there's the standard version, and if you license with the standard version, it's ideal for physical servers or very lightly virtualized servers. And a Windows Server license, standard license, allows you to have 2 VMs running on it. Now, you can have 2 VMs on it. If you want more than 2 on there, you can stack the licenses. So if you've got a Windows Server standard with 16 cores requirement, if you want 4 VMs on there, you'd have to double up those 16 cores to 32 cores. Then you can run 4 VMs on a Windows Server standard. Okay. The next version is Windows Server Data Center. The main difference between the two, there are some very small differences, but the main differences between the two is the number of VMs you can run on a host. Now, Windows Server Data Center allows you to run an unlimited number of VMs on that server. So with an unlimited number of VMs, it's great when you have quite a substantial virtualized environment. And you can use clustering as well. So, you can have it across multiple servers. But when you're looking at clustering, you need to license every host, because even if it is a passive node, you still need to license it for Windows servers. So fairly simple concepts for licensing, but ask your account managers if you need assistance, and they will help you work out how many licenses you need. Now, I've already mentioned clustering, but there's a host of other services that run on there. RDS is a common one. Clustering, as I said, I've already mentioned, but Hyper-V on there. So Hyper-V is Windows virtualization solution that sits underneath the VMs. Okay, now that's included in the license. If you are running VMware, you still license it in exactly the same way, because Windows Server licensing works irrespective of what your hypervisor is. Now, the reason I bring this up, Broadcom have taken over VMware, and the pricing is a little bit volatile at this stage. So some people are looking at other options for their virtualization. Now, Hyper-V and VMware are pretty much feature compatible. They've all got the same similar features. So things like vMotion in VMware, you have live migration in Hyper-V. And if you're using Windows Server Data Center, giving you unlimited licenses in each host allows you to move servers between different hosts without worrying about how many licenses you need on each. Sorry, and just finishing off then, when buying under an EES agreement, you always get software assurance, and these benefits will help you in other areas as I move on. And one of them is downgrade rights. So you always buy the latest version of the server, but you get downgrade rights to run 2019, 2012, 2008, hopefully not by now. But, at the moment, it's Windows Server 2022, so you get downgrade rights, but you can also upgrade during the period if you want as well. Okay, that's Windows Server licensing, and in reality, that hasn't changed for several years now. But what has changed, Microsoft have added another option for licensing Windows Server, and this is per virtual machine. Now, per virtual machine means you don't have to buy for the physical host, you just buy for individual virtual machines. Now, you can get these as service subscriptions through CSP, or you can just use your standard licenses within EES because it's a software assurance benefit. So where this is particularly useful is if you've bought, because quite a few, you still buy your Windows Server licenses under a perpetual license, either through OEM when you buy the hardware, or through something like Select, which is a perpetual license. In that instance, you may have bought a Windows Server Standard perpetual license, but you now need a third VM on there. So you can add a license just for the third VM using one of these methods. So it has its benefits. When you do this, you need to buy a minimum of 8 cores per VM. Another place it will be useful is if you've got VMs in the cloud and you need to license them with academic licenses. This is another area where it can be useful. One thing to remember is this does not include Windows for the physical host, so that needs to be licensed separately. Okay, just something to be aware of. If I move away from Windows Server for a minute, there is System Center. Now, System Center is a suite of products for managing your desktops and your servers. Desktop management, a lot of people are moving to Intune, but Configuration Manager is here. Now, Configuration Manager licensing comes with the desktops. So if you're managing just the desktops, then you don't actually need the System Center license that runs on the server to manage the desktops. But if you're managing servers in any way, for instance, you're using Data Protection Manager to back up your servers and VMs, or you're using Operations Manager to manage your servers, then you need to buy management licenses for the servers. This is done in exactly the same way as it is for Windows Server. It's a per core plus cal model. And if you actually want to protect or manage all your servers, it's quite useful in that Microsoft have got a bundle called Core Infrastructure Server, which is a bundle of Windows Server and System Center that you buy together with a slight saving, not major, but this then means you can manage all your servers without any licensing issues. But the reason I bring System Center up in this scenario is it also includes Virtual Machine Manager, which can be used to manage Hyper-V at scale in larger environments. And this then would be compatible to vCenter, which you would get with VMware. Okay. So moving on again. Now, your Windows Server licenses I've been talking about are for use on your own servers within your own estate. However, Microsoft allows you, with software assurance, to license servers in other environments. So Microsoft have a whole set of rules in place on how you have to license servers depending on who's hosting your hardware for you. So for instance, if you're using a local data center, or what Microsoft call listed outsourcers, if you're using them, you're entitled to use your licenses on a server that you own in their data center. But from, I think it was 2022, the end of 2022, you can also license it now on shared server resources in a hosted, in a listed provider, listed outsourcer. Then you have what Microsoft called listed outsourcers. So these are your AWS's, Google's, Alibaba. So there's a small number of these large players in the field where Microsoft have got stricter licensing rules for hosting your servers in their environments. So if you want to do that, have a chat with us, because just to make sure that you're compliant with the licensing. Yeah, so those are the rules from Microsoft. And then the last option, obviously, is Azure. And being Microsoft's data center, the rules are a lot more flexible to you here. So bear this in mind if you're buying Windows Server licenses, but you're not hosting them on premises. So having mentioned Azure, most of you hopefully know what Azure is. It's Microsoft's data center that holds loads of services in the cloud. The specific one we are looking at here is virtual machines. And if you look at the calculator link in here that Mark is going to be putting into your chat windows, we will, you can look at what the estimate of running a VM in the cloud is going to be. But if you're running it in the cloud, a VM in the cloud, there's a couple of things to consider to save on cost. License cost. Microsoft run Windows, corporate Windows Server licenses in Azure. So you can tick a box when you set up the server and use your on-premise licenses in the cloud. You can use Windows Standard Server on-premise or in Azure, and Data Center Server on-premise and in Azure. So this significantly reduces costs for you in Azure. And another way of saving costs is to use reserved instances. Now, this is the compute stage, and compute then is the amount of RAM and processors that you give to a server. So by looking at Azure reserved instances, it's a server you need to be running full time, but this then gives you another significant amount of savings when you run it in the cloud. And both of these savings are built into the calculator, so you can see how much savings you would get. To be honest, have a look at them because they are quite significant. Okay, so that's talking about server virtualization. Now, there's also desktop virtualization. If you consider VMware, they have Horizon. Microsoft have Windows Server, where you can have remote desktop and VDI running on the servers. Now, from a licensing point of view with Microsoft, the server licenses include the VDI technology. But Windows 10 and Windows 11 need VDI rights to be able to access VDI. Now, something not a lot of people are aware of, if you have a VDI solution with any vendor, then you need VDI rights to use it. Staff licenses in the ES include this license, but student licenses do not include VDI. So Windows Server licenses include VDI, but the Windows 10 licenses staff get include it, students don't get it. Apart from this particular solution. So if you're using Azure Virtual Desktop to create your VDI solution, then the Windows client license is included in here. Okay, so if you're using a solution that doesn't include VDI for students, you then need to buy a Windows Server, a Windows client license, or a VDA license at about £10 a pop. And if it's for your entire student estate, that's quite a cost you have to consider when doing this. Now, the Azure Virtual Desktop, as you guess, is in Azure, but you have full control of what you set up within Azure. It's your service. You build it and you customize it to the way you want. You can create individual VMs for users for Windows 10 or Windows 11, and then they would have that persistent desktop running in Azure. Now, to keep costs down, you probably don't want to give everyone an individual VM. So what you can do is you can pool the VMs so that multiple users share the same VM. The users, though, are not aware of what's going on because it uses FS Logic in the background to keep a copy of the profile and the settings for the individual users. So as far as the individual users are concerned, they think they've got their own VM in Azure. But as I said, this is all managed by you, and it's your solution. And these desktops then can be accessed by your Windows server, but it can also be accessed in iOS, Android as well, and within most modern browsers. But I've talked about virtual desktops where you give each user their own virtual machine or a pooled virtual machine. But there's also the option of just publishing apps. So using remote apps, you can publish an app out to the users that are running in your environment. But it looks to the user as if they're running it on their own machine. So that's Azure Virtual Desktop. Okay. Then finally, I'm looking at a different solution from Microsoft to do exactly the same thing as you have with Azure Virtual Desktop. So this provides users with a cloud PC that they can access. The big difference here is Microsoft do all the management. What you do, you say you want to buy a cloud PC, you buy the cloud PC, you've got access to it, and you you manage it as you want. But you don't have to configure it. You just say what machine you want, and you get access to it. So all the dog work has been done by Microsoft, and you can use this on it's a monthly charge, but in EES, it's obviously part of your agreement, so it's a yearly charge. Okay, so it's actually the same technology, but Microsoft have taken all the work off your hands, so you can actually run this solution without any real hard work, if you don't want. Okay, so it's a scalable solution, and it starts with 2 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gig of storage. So that would be a base machine, and you can scale up to 16 CPUs, 64 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. Now, as you scale up, the costs are obviously going to scale up as well. Just something to bear in mind. So make sure that you size the machine to whichever solution you need. The other big difference here between Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 is with Windows 365, you only have the option of a persistent single virtual machine for that user. Okay, so Microsoft have got two solutions for the same problem in reality, and you then decide which one you want.